So if you've been playing Dune Awakening, you've probably noticed the giant sandworms that are infesting these open sand areas, otherwise known as the Shai Halud. These are going to be unkillable creatures which will be spawning in the open sand and will chase you down and kill you if you spend too long on the sand. And it is going to be something you have to watch out for, because there are going to be a threat that is going to pretty much extend throughout the game, and you're never going to be able to fully escape them. You can build flying vehicles to evade them, which is going to make it a lot easier, but you will still have to deal with them in one way or the other, since spice sand is going to be something that spawns on open sand, and you're going to need this especially when it comes to the end game. So you're always going to need to expose yourself to the risk of sandworms. But how exactly do these sandworms work, you might ask, because it is a little bit confusing exactly how they operate, and I've been testing this out for over a day now quite extensively. It does seem to operate on a timer-based system, and what I mean by that is when you do end up going onto the open sand, a kind of invisible or hidden timer will start, and this timer will decrease at a certain rate depending on a couple of factors, such as the gear that you are using, what kind of actions you are doing on the sand. Certain actions will kind of decrease the time a lot faster than others, and also there are going to be other factors such as drum sand, which I'll get to later on, which will also very drastically decrease the timer and make the sandworm aggro on you. Now it's important to note the sandworm cannot kill you once you are touching solid ground. Even if the sandworm does end up attacking structures near you, I've had times where I'm literally sitting in base and I've built into the open sand, and as long as I'm standing inside the safe zone, even if the sandworm triggers on my base structure and attacks certain parts of my base because it's built onto the no-go zone, which is the open sand, I've literally at times the sandworm kind of jumps up beneath me and actually does kind of eat my character, but because I'm standing on the safe zone, the sandworm cannot kill me. So it seems like it's hard programmed into the game. If you are standing on solid ground, the sandworm cannot kill you no matter what. Even if it touches you, you will be safe. So let's talk about how the sandworm aggros, how you can avoid the sandworm, and at the end of this video, you should have no problem avoiding the sandworm. You should pretty much never die to a sandworm again, unless of course the sandworm does bug out, which actually does happen from time to time. I've had times in the past where the sandworm has done weird things like fly around and kill people. I've seen it happen to other people where they're not supposed to be killed. So watch out, there are some weird buggy exceptions, but for the most part, you should be safe as long as you understand how it works. So when you do enter the sand, you will notice there will be like a kind of like a little vibration meter. This kind of tells you, lets you measure how much the sandworm is hearing you or the actions you are doing. If you do end up standing dead still, you will notice that this bar will be completely flat, and this means that you are safe. As long as this bar doesn't move, you are not making any sound, and the sandworm will not be able to pick up your movements. Now, when you do end up walking or running, you'll start to see this bar will start to slowly move a little bit, and this will indicate the sandworm, if you continue with this action, will eventually pick up your sound and it will eventually aggro on you. So just keep that in mind. When you do end up using items, however, such as the compactor or other tools, you might notice that it will end up emitting more sound frequencies, and you'll notice the like kind of parabolic meter will start going from a whitish color to a orange color. Now that means that you are emitting more sound, and every time you do these actions, you are essentially reducing the time that it will take for the sound to aggro on you. Now there are certain items that are going to kind of have more sound effects than others. You can kind of see when you end up going to the crafting benches, it'll tell you there how much these items will end up impacting the sandworm. There will end up being some items you can actually wear that will help reduce the sound impact you have on the ground, and these items will allow you to kind of evade the sandworm a little bit longer. It is important to note that the sandworm will eventually aggro on you. You can't infinitely evade it, but you can, however, increase the amount of time it takes for you to aggro depending on the gear that you're wearing and depending on how kind of violent the movements you are doing on the sand. Think of it like a stopwatch. When you do end up entering the sand, I don't know what the starting amount is, but a certain timer will start. If you're standing dead still, it seems the timer is completely frozen. I did actually end up testing where I went onto open sand and completely stood still, and I actually was able to survive for over half an hour before I eventually died of thirst. Now I did notice that when you are staying on open sand, your character will do sometimes like a passive kicking animation on the ground, and that actually does agitate the little sound meter ever so slightly. So I'm not sure if you stand on open sand long enough, eventually the sandworm will aggro on you, but it does seem that for the most part, you can actually stand on the sand for so long that the only thing that will kill you is probably going to end up being either dehydration or a sandstorm before the sandworm ends up killing you. So keep that in mind. If you do stand still on open sand, you should be safe from the sandworm. However, I'm not sure if that will actually be infinite. It is possible that eventually the sand will eventually aggro on you, especially when you do these little passive animations where you kind of kick the sand a little bit, but it does seem like that will keep you safe for the most part. Now back to what I was saying about the timer. When you do end up entering sand, you are going to kind of start like a hidden timer. Now this time, I'm not exactly sure how long the starting amount is, maybe a minute more or less, and every time you do certain actions, you are going to decrease that timer. Like I said, shooting the compactor is going to make the sand aggro a little bit faster, and when you do end up standing on drum sand, you are going to decrease time very quickly. You're going to see these icons when you look at the map. When you press M, you'll see these little circles, and they're going to have red lines to them. That is going to indicate drum sand. sand. You're going to notice when you press M on the map, you will see certain like red circles with dots in them. That is going to indicate drum sand. The ones that have lines through them are going to be quicksand. You're going to want to avoid both of these because obviously quicksand means you can't really move, and that's going to be very dangerous because that's where sand will obviously be able to kill you. And the drum sand is going to be the other counterpart. It's going to be kind of like a very darkish color sand. You can actually see it visually on the map as well. It is going to have a very dark color to the sand. So these are kind of like big, bright, reddish spots when you do drive or run near them. So you can see them both on the map and in person. You want to avoid these because this is going to aggro the sandworm a lot quicker. And from what I can tell, this is basically like I said with a timer. When you do end up moving over drum sand, that timer is going to decrease very, very quickly. Now let's discuss what happens when the aggro is actually triggered. So when you do end up running out of time on the open sand, you will notice the little sound meter will go very, very erratic and it will go bright red. And this indicates that the sandworm has aggroed. It has two phases essentially. It has a warning phase and a attack phase. When you first aggro the sandworm, you'll see it kind of erupting out of the ground. It'll make it like a loud roar, and then it will slowly go back down into the sand before disappearing for a few seconds, and then it will come out again and it will start charging towards you. So it will always warn you first before attacking, so you do have a little bit of a warning when the sandworm aggro does happen. When your sandworm aggros, it does kind of depend where about the sandworm is on the map, because if it is closer to you, obviously when it aggros, it will have a much shorter distance to cover and it'll be able to kill you a little bit quicker. So the amount of time that you have might vary depending on how far the sandworm is relative to your starting location. Now, once the sandworm does end up charging towards you, you don't have very long, probably about 10 to 15 seconds before it does end up catching up with you. It is also valuable to note no vehicle can escape the sandworm's charge. A flying vehicle obviously can because it's in the air, so the sandworm can't actually detect your sound. But when you're on the ground, no driving vehicle can escape the sandworm. You will eventually get caught by it. You can obviously somewhat prolong how long it's going to take to die, but you will not be able to escape it indefinitely. So it is very important to note when you do end up aggroing the salmon, the first thing you need to do is get to solid land as quickly as possible. Now, you don't need to touch solid land completely in order to escape it. Sometimes just going near solid land works, especially when it's like these mountain ranges. When you see like a big steep mountain, even if the mountain is on sand, as long as you get close enough to that mountain, if you go like hug right up against the mountain face, the sandworm will lose aggro. So there's kind of like this little zone, a small little zone. It's probably about like 2 or 3 meters where you see solid objects where the sandworm will lose aggro. So even if you see like a steep mountain cliff, but there's no actual solid ground for you to climb on or get on, just get up to the mountain face and you will lose the aggro of the sandworm. Now, it's also important to note that once you do end up losing the aggro, once you end up touching these safe zones, you kind of restart the timer. So if let's say you want to go to a location, like you're on a solid island, so to speak, you can kind of think of the open sand like water and maybe the sandworm as like a shark. I don't know, think of it whatever you want. But basically when you're on an island and you want to try to go over a large piece of sand, what you can do is you can kind of just touch by a maybe a little smaller island that is in between and just continue to drive on, because as soon as you touch that island, you're essentially restarting the aggro period. You're restarting the timer, so you don't have to stand there and wait for 10-15 seconds. As long as you just quickly touch it and go, you can restart the timer. So just make sure that every now and then, whenever possible, you're touching solid land to keep resetting that timer in order to prevent the salmon from aggroing on you, especially when it comes to those longer distance trips. It can be quite dangerous if you don't have any safe zones to touch, but as long as there is a small island, you can just quickly reset the timer. That will help out a lot. Now, talking about flying vehicles, flying vehicles are going to make you a lot safer against the sandworm, but it's not going to make you completely safe, especially when it comes to harvesting spice sand, because you are going to need to kind of get out of your helicopter every now and then you're going to also need to obviously be on the sand using a compactor, which will eventually trigger the sandworm. Now, the way you are going to be able to save yourself a lot of headache is by just resetting the timer, by getting into your helicopter periodically, flying up a couple of meters, getting off the ground, and then landing soon after, which will reset the timer as well. So if you're going to go harvest some spice or maybe flower sand or maybe a broken ship or whatever it is you want to do with a helicopter, what I like to do is I like to land the helicopter, maybe shoot several shots with the compact on the floor before it aggros on you, get in the helicopter ideally before it aggros to save you a bit of time, go up in the air just a little bit, come back down, get out, and then pick up the spice sand or whatever it is you're doing. This should restart the timer and allow you to safely get away and keep the sandworm away from aggroing on you, because every time the sandworm aggroes on you, you're going to have to wait for it to then kind of lose aggro, go back on the ground, which is going to waste you a lot of time, and it's going to make your process of gathering items a lot slower. So try avoid triggering the aggro if possible. Now, where it does get a little bit complicating is when there's multiple people, because it appears that there is going to be a certain vicinity where there is going to be kind of like a shared aggro aggro or a shared timer. I did actually end up testing this with someone where I did end up using them to kind of just seesaw between myself and them in the sand, where at one point there would always be one of us touching the sand, and then when the other one escaped, there would be one on the sand. So it does appear that the sandworm does kind of use other people as a shared aggro. So even though I myself individually was still resetting my own aggro, it does appear that the other person with me did also share my aggro meter and also end up triggering the sandworm, even though they individually were doing the same thing and going up and down, preventing the sandworm from aggroing. However, this does not actually work, since it seems like there is a certain vicinity. I don't know how big the vicinity is, but it does seem like there is a vicinity where there is going to be like a shared timer or a shared aggro. So do keep that in mind if you're harvesting spice with other people nearby. They are going to trigger the sandworm along with you, so do keep that in mind. It is not going to be an individual timer or individual aggro, but rather a shared aggro, at least up until a certain point. But again, I don't exactly know how big that point is, but do keep that in mind. So with this knowledge, the way you should be approaching sandworms is looking at everything like a stopwatch. And again, when you do enter open sand, remember that timer has started. Whatever actions you do are going to decrease this time at a certain rate. Some of these actions are going to decrease a lot faster than others. Make sure you turn off shields before going onto open sand, because this will instantly trigger the sandworm if you are on foot and have a shield active. But if you do end up being careful, you should actually pretty much never die to a sandworm, unless it of course bugs out, which can happen, and it's very frustrating when it does happen. I really hope that Funcom do address these bugs. But if the sandworm does not bug out, you will pretty much be able to survive against the sandworm indefinitely, because once you understand how this timer works and once you start looking at like a timer, you should be able to very easily evade the sandworm, and it shouldn't be a big threat later on in the game. Anyway, I hope this video helps you out. If it did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below if there's any other useful tips you know of to avoid the sandworm. I'd love to find out, and I'll see you guys again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.